We on? Yo,
Yeah,
what's up, everyone? How are we all today? I am back. I'm back in the driver's seat. I know that
we've
I
kicked
haven't been
Yanni
on
out.
the calls. Yeah, we kicked Yanni out. I know that I haven't been on the calls for a little while. I've been moving house and I'm out of Sydney now. I'm up at the Central Coast. This is I know that a lot of our listeners are from all over the world. So the Central Coast is about an hour, well, where I am on the coast, about an hour and a half drive north of Sydney. And it's very exciting because this is now that we are Unity Gym online since we sold the gym. This is the first time in my life that I've actually been able to live wherever I want without a consideration of where I work. So it's pretty cool. I'm in my own studio at home. I haven't set it all up yet, but it's really exciting for me. So yes, here we are. How are you, Richie?
Pretty good. I'm pretty good, Brad. Thanks for jumping on the show with me today. It would have been a solo gig if it wasn't
Yeah,
for you.
yeah. But here we are. And hello to Ricky Webster from Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to the show. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're watching in either our UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group or on YouTube, let us know. Say hello so I can give you a shout out. I really love to know who we're reaching. Where's Alabama is down south, isn't it, Ricky? If I'm not mistaken. So Richie, today we are talking about structural balance, right? That's what you guys were talking about yesterday. We're talking.
That's
You guys
right.
did a little
That's
bit of intro.
why it's important, why we need to do it, and our personal experiences and what we know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, rock on. So what we're going to go deeper into structural balance today, and what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the importance of the way that you train to get volume, really, when it comes to structural balance. So there's, we yesterday we pre-framed structural balance is about balance between the outer unit and the inner unit. So if we talk about the shoulder, for example, the outer unit is the deltoid, the lats, the pecs, the bicep, tricep, the big muscles that create the big movement. Whereas the inner unit is things like the rotator cuff, scapular stabilizers, like the muscles that don't really make up the shape of your body and create the big movement, but that stabilize the system. We talked about balance between strength and flexibility. We talked about a balance between upper and lower body, a balance between limb symmetry from left side to right side. Today, we're going to go specifically in the balance between agonist and antagonist. So, what I mean by that is agonist and antagonist. If I do a bicep curl, then the agonist is the bicep, okay, and the antagonist is the tricep. So, the opposing muscle systems in a joint, being the elbow joint in that
That
case.
that and you could also say agonist antagonist movement systems like push and pull.
Push and pull, that's right. So horizontal push, horizontal pull, or vertical push, vertical pull, like we do in the UMS. We're basically going to talk about the way that you train those systems with primary lifts and supplementary lifts, and then also through a program split. So this is really important to get right because if you, like I think where a lot of people go wrong with their training so we're going to talk purely about strength development and about muscle hypertrophy. So building muscle and building strength. And one of the first places that a lot of people go wrong is really understanding volume and how to get enough volume on a muscle group. And you look at all the things that you want to achieve with your goals, and then you try and fit it all in and you don't get enough volume. Like you're doing the right exercises, you're doing the right things, but you're not getting enough volume. And without enough volume, you don't achieve adaptation. Right, Richie?
Yeah, that's right. And I
Yeah.
think the push pull system and understanding agonist antagonist systems really gives you a good foundation to create a split and create a workout off of and get enough volume in.
Yeah. So the very first thing to really talk about there is what Richard means by the push-pull system. So, like for example, if you're going to be doing bench pressing and you don't want to run into injury and imbalances in the body, then you really need to do a one-to-one ratio of bench press to bent over row. For example, that's horizontal push-pull movements. You could also do a one-to-one ratio of ring push-ups to ring rows, or there's lots of different ways you can do it. But what that means is that you're doing like one rep of horizontal push to one rep of horizontal row. So if you do 5 sets of bench pressing 5 by 5, then you want to do 5 sets of 5 reps of bent over row as well. So that's the first concept of, balancing this agonist and antagonist. But then, you know, in order to get enough volume, like, so for example, you know, for strength development, to build strength, the research shows that you want to be doing, between 25 to 50 repetitions on the same muscle group in one workout. But then when you also look at strength development, you need to really do a level of intensity where you're working your 5 RM or lower, or your 6 RM or lower. There's very different ways to go into it, but this is a really, basic understanding of it, which means that you should be doing like 5 sets of 5, or 5 sets of 3, or 5 sets of 1, or whatever, or 8 sets of 3, or 8 sets of 1, or whatever it is. And if you look at all of those examples, in all of those examples that I just gave, the most amount of reps that you would have got there would have been 25. If you do 5 sets of 5, that's 25 reps. So you're literally just scraping in on the bare minimum amount of work required to increase your strength. And then if you look at hypertrophy, the research shows that you need to do a minimum of 40 to 70 repetitions on a single muscle group. And then again, there's so many different variables here, but the base at the grassroots level of hypertrophy, you usually do sets of 8 to 12 reps, which means if you did 5 sets of 8, you would barely get your 40 repetitions, which means you've barely touched on the minimum amount of volume required to achieve hypertrophy. So how do you go from there? Because another option is to do, instead of 5 sets of 8, do 10 sets of 8, and there you'll get your 80 repetitions. But doing 10 sets of 8, oh my God, that's just going to murder you. Like if you did 10 sets of 8 reps on bench press, or imagine doing 10 sets of 8 reps on squatting, Richie. I mean, you can do it. People do these kinds of programs, right?
Yep.
Like German volume training. But God, is it hard? And it's not something I wouldn't wish it on my enemy. So where do you go from there? Well, that's where we talk about supplementary lifts and supplementary exercises. And I mean, there's different definitions of supplementary lifts, but how would you describe supplementary lifts, Richie? Like, how do you use
So,
supplementary lifts in your training?
so supplementary exercises would generally be less intensive and less neurally demanding as a primary exercise. So, for example, a primary exercise might be a back squat, but then a supplementary exercise could be something that has less coordination involved, less stability involved, or sometimes maybe even more stability involved, but generally like you're using less of your body. So a good supplementary exercise I like to do is a single leg variation, because naturally it's not as neurally demanding. It's not as difficult to perform, like say a 150 kilo back squat would be nowhere near as difficult as say a bodyweight pistol squat or a single leg step up. So those are the things I think you got to consider when you're trying to program your supplementaries. Although, you could program another squatting variation, but generally the intensity and the demand is going to be a lot less than a primary
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah, you absolutely, like, there's so many different ways to do it, and there's different ways to define what a supplementary exercise is. For me, the way I think of it is, it's basically an exercise that just adds volume to what the primary lifts are.
Yep.
And the way that I would argue, at least definitely in the UMS, the way that we choose our primary lifts are the lifts that are the biggest bang for your buck for strength development and muscle development. Like, for example, a bench press is far more beneficial for the development of strength than a chest fly, right? But they both still train the chest. And if you did them both in the same workout, then they're both going to absolutely add volume to the pecs, to the chest, to build hypertrophy or whatever. But if you did chest flies first, then you would fatigue the pecs, which means you wouldn't be able to lift as much weight if you did your bench pressing afterwards, which is a technique that is used in bodybuilding. Like, there's different ways that you go about programming if you want to build muscle. But for strength development, that wouldn't be a good way to train, because for strength development you would want to really, make sure that you could lift your maximum weight possible on that bench press. So
Yep.
that's and there's so many variables to this. Like this is where programming is such
Yep.
a beautiful thing, right, Richie? Like there are wrong ways to do it, but there's so many right ways to do it. It just depends on what the goal is for the program cycle.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess we should. I want to move into more why it's so crucial having this sort of structural balance concept. I did title the video this way, so I did title the video exactly that: why structural balance is so important. So, what do you think? What's your number one, I guess, takeaway with structural balance, Rad? That why it's so important?
Well, it's so important, basically to make sure that the body moves efficiently,
Mm,
injury and pain free. Because without it, you really, and we've experienced this, right? We've all, before we understood how to program for structural balance, we all suffered the consequences for it.
yep.
And it's really important to, like at the grassroots level, at least when it comes to strength training, is to do this one-to-one, push pull in a joint system.
Yep.
And then when it comes to, if you want to add volume, make sure that you add volume in a way that complements that. And the other thing to consider with, like for example, for structural balance, inner unit, outer unit. So if we talk about that shoulder again, the big muscles, the pecs and the lats, for example.
Yep.
You want to train this pushing and pulling one-to-one, but then you also want to train inner and outer unit. And I wouldn't ever, well, not ever, but very, very rarely would I ever train the inner unit before I train the outer unit. But I would want to do both of them in the same workout. So that's another consideration for structural balance and for supplementary lifts, right? Like doing your
Yep.
bench pressing and your bent over rows, but then doing your external rotator cuff and your trap three raise work after those exercises.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the push pull system makes it hard not to come out of that sort of structural balance formula, because when you're trained, like for a structure for your shoulders to be balanced, right, you need to have strong anterior side of the shoulder and you need to have strong posterior side of the shoulder. So doing the push and the pull takes care of that. You don't need to worry about too much other supplementary exercises to take care of that when you're sort of ingraining that into your split in every workout. So what I mean is, um, by nature, when you do pulling exercises, you're basically developing strength in the shoulder that's needed for the pushing movements, and vice versa. So it's very
Hmm.
well rounded, and you don't need to spend too much time outside of the push pull system to really effectively train the structural balance component. But
Hmm.
that being said, you do need to, focus in on those inner units as well. And that's why the supplementaries, and that's where the supplementaries would come in as well. So once you've taken care of your primaries, your push pull, you could spend your supplementary time working on your rotator cuff, working on scapular stability, and things like that.
Yep. Yep. Vinny's asked a great question saying, is it perhaps worth adding an extra set to the at-home workout? So 6 instead of 5 to add volume. Absolutely. You just want to be aware of why it is you're doing it, and you need to manage fatigue and all those things. But adding volume to training is a a great way to break through strength plateaus, like increasing volume. The two variables you've really, look, there's so many variables, but let's just talk about intensity and volume. Intensity is how heavy you're lifting, and volume is how much you're lifting, like how many sets, how many reps. And to add an extra set is a really good way to break through strength plateaus. It's just important to understand why you're doing it, Vinny, and that's where good programming comes in. Look, we could talk about this forever, and we're already 4 minutes overdue. So maybe if anybody has any good questions, maybe we can talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, Vinny. And if anybody else has any questions, just hit us up in the comments on YouTube, and we can go a little bit deeper into this tomorrow. But we do have to jump into our 6-week peak performance program private group to give them their daily coaching. So
Awesome.
thanks, everyone, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
See you
Have a
soon.
great day.